So many years ago, I went and had coffee with a friend of mine who was also a member of my church, and she was pregnant, very pregnant, in fact, 8 months along. And in the middle of our conversation, she sat up straight, touched her pregnant belly, and said, "Oh, she's really kicking." And before I knew what was happening, she grabbed my hand and placed my palm right on the spot. And she said, "Can you feel that?" And I said, "Sure enough, I could definitely feel some thumping and bumping going along. It was sort of like someone was in there trying to put on a tight sweater." And my friend smiled and said, "Ooh, she's excited. I can tell she really loves you." And it was such a nice thing to say. And I said, "Well, either that or she's very excited by all the caffeine that you're consuming." And she said, "Oh, no, no, this is decaf." She said, "She can hear the sound of your voice. And I can tell that she's saying that she cannot wait to meet you." So I leaned down and I said, "Hi, you." And then I said to my friend, "Have you decided on a name yet?" And I didn't even know that you had already knew the gender of this baby. She said, "No, I haven't decided on a name. I first have to see her face before naming her. It's an old family tradition of ours." And she said, "But I already know her. And I just know that she is a girl." She said, "The doctor did a sonogram and all that, but I did not want to be told the gender. But that doesn't matter. I just know. I already know." I said, "Uh-huh. And how do you know that?" She said, "Well, this might sound weird to you, but last week I had a dream. And in my dream, my baby spoke to me." I said, "And what did she say?" She said, in a very clear little girl voice, she said to me, "Everything is wonderful." Well, it turns out it was a little girl. And per her family's tradition, my friend looked at her newborn face and gave her the name Kara. Kara is a Greek word that means joy. So I guess I've been around too long now to question the mystery of things like that. At the time I had that coffee shop conversation with my friend, I was more of a skeptic. I thought, I don't care what she thinks. The odds are just 50-50, boy or girl. And about that dream that she had, I thought, well, people just have interesting dreams. Now I think I know better. Now, don't get me wrong, I can still be skeptical about many things, but I've simply had too many interesting experiences that cannot be explained away. So instead of laughing off something like a dream where a little girl not yet born talks to her mom, I have a much better appreciation of the mystic bonds we simply cannot explain. In fact, if we look around and listen, if we're simply alert, I'm convinced we'll see that the world is full of that kind of magic. And I think this is a season when we're reminded to be especially alert. Now, one of the most common unexplained magical things is when you think about someone you haven't thought about in a very, very long time, and you're not sure why that person even popped into your head for no apparent reason. And the next thing you know, they call you, or they send you an email or a letter. This happens to Ellen constantly. I can't explain it. It's as if we are connected somehow by an invisible network that cuts through distance and time. So, a child still in her mother's womb, long before she has the normal capacity to form complete sentences, reaches out to say, "Hello, I love you, I can't wait to meet you, and by the way, everything is wonderful." I witnessed a lot of that sort of thing when I was a hospice chaplain. So many times, several days before a patient's death, I watched them hold conversations with people who were invisible to me, but they could see and hear them plain as day. Sometimes they would even hold out their hand and wrap their fingers around the outstretched hand that I could not see. Now, were those hallucinations? Were their brains just replaying old tapes of loved ones? What is it, the medication talking? Maybe, but I don't think so. The more I saw of that, the more I stopped trying to analyze it and rationalize it away. And when I did that, the more I appreciated how beautiful it was and how incredibly lucky I was to witness it. It was almost as if I was invited to be there so that I could know that what we experience with our five physical senses is really just scratching the surface of a far greater reality. It was as if I was being shown a door, opening up to a place where anything is possible, where time and space have no limits and everything and everyone is surrounded by pure love. And I think that if I was invited to witness all of that, it then obliges me to be a witness to share what I've seen and heard and felt. You know, not all that long ago in human history, people had a far better appreciation of all this. We know that the Enlightenment and the rise of rational scientific thinking has done a lot for us. I'm really glad for technological advances like vaccines and frozen tater tots. One of my favorite advances. And being able to order a pair of socks online and have them show up on my porch the very next day. That's wonderful. But I think we've lost a bit of the mysterious and magical along the way, which might mean when we hear a story like Mary visiting her relative Elizabeth, story that Joe told, and Elizabeth claims that the baby she's carrying, who would turn out to be known as John the Baptist, when that baby leaps for joy, well, we think it's a sweet story, but we also take it with a grain of salt. We know that Luke is telling us a very old story from a pre-scientific time and place. We also know that the Bible scholars say Elizabeth and Mary were just really playing their roles as historical archetypes. So they were models that had been used previously in stories much older than this one from a variety of religious traditions, including Judaism. Elizabeth's story fit the ancient pattern of someone who's well past their childbearing years, miraculously becoming pregnant anyway. Think of the story of Genesis, from Genesis, Sarah giving birth to Isaac. And we know that Mary's pregnancy by the Holy Spirit with a child who was destined for greatness was not the first time. A very similar story had been told about the birth of a king in one ancient culture or another. Even the song that Mary sings after Elizabeth says these things to her, the song as if she's suddenly in a Broadway musical and she starts singing, "My soul magnifies the Lord." It's what we call the Magnificat. The choir sang part of that today. Well, the lyrics of that song sound very much like the one that was sung by Hannah, the mother of the Old Testament prophet Samuel. Just like Elizabeth, Hannah had been unable to have children, but now it's a joyful thing that she's pregnant. It also reminds us strongly of the song sung by Miriam, the wife of Moses, a song that she belted out like an opera diva right after the children of Israel had escaped from Egypt. So we know all of that. And Luke knew all of that. And so did the people Luke originally wrote his gospel for. They knew all of that too. They knew the difference between cold, hard facts and on the one hand, and on the other hand, archetypes and myths and parallels from antiquity. You know, just because they lived a couple thousand years ago, they weren't dumb or any more gullible than we. Those early Christians who heard and read this story, they were rational people and as skeptical as you and me, but they were still convinced that it was all absolutely true. Maybe not true in all the ways that we have been taught to define fact from fiction, but true nonetheless in ways that transcend those kinds of black and white binary definitions. Because they understood something that we often seem to have lost touch with. In our burning desire to be modern and scientific and rational and skeptical, as if those have looked world are the only legitimate avenues for discerning the truth, we've apparently forgotten that old archetypes and ancient stories are repeated and played out through the ages for a very good reason, because they point to a mystical truth, one that goes above and beyond the kind of truth that can only be proven scientifically and rationally. Joseph Campbell, who wrote about archetypes and mythology, said that myth is much more important and true than history. History, he said, is just journalism. And you know how reliable that is. And what about love? If we believe that love is real, but it's also true that love cannot be weighed on a scale, then we've already entered and even embraced the realm of truth that goes above and beyond our attempts to claim that if something cannot be proven rationally, then we cannot buy into it. So today we may wonder, did John the Baptist really leap for joy in his mother's womb? Did that unborn child somehow recognize that Mary was pregnant with the Son of God? Well, let me put it this way. Yes. Now, how do I know for sure? It would be better to ask, how can I not know for sure? How can I possibly say that babies, before they're born, do not communicate with their mothers? Or that old friends we just happen to think of call us out of the blue for no reason at all? Or that people we love who have passed over to the other side of the river don't call our name and reach out to hold our hand as we are about to step into that water? I cannot say that stuff does not happen, because it does happen. Maybe I'm too mystical, but I prefer to say that there is no way I can ever claim to know it all about how the sacred operates. I prefer to think that the old saying that God works in mysterious ways is a whole lot truer than we sometimes think. Maybe it's truer than what we are always comfortable with. And I think that is the bigger point of this story and our own story. That God is always working in ways that we cannot explain. And honestly, we're missing the point and wasting energy if we spend too much time and energy trying to explain it away. I'm content to let the mystery be. The real story about Elizabeth and John and Mary, and the real point about your life and mine, is that we ought to be jumping for joy. Joy. Because we have each other to take this magical journey of life together. Joy because in this season, and truly every season, we can look forward to the presence of God. The God of the beautiful, mysterious universe who tells through baby, hello, I love you, and everything is wonderful.